The emergency signal cut through space like a knife, reaching every corner of the galaxy. On the Council station floating in neutral space, Ambassador Vex stared at the incoming transmission with dread filling his 3 hearts. The blue hologram flickered, showing a Thylan elder with tears streaming down his scaled face. "This is Elder Khan of Thylan Prime." The alien's voice trembled. "Our world is dying. The harvesters have broken through our outer defenses. They're consuming everything." Vex watched in horror as the feed switched to aerial footage of the Thylan homeworld. Once beautiful cities of crystal and coral now lay in ruins. Massive mechanical creatures, each the size of a building, crawled across the landscape like metallic locusts. They devoured trees, buildings, even the very soil itself. Nothing organic survived their passage. "By the ancient codes," Vex whispered, his aide Rilk nodding grimly beside him. "How many are left?" 30 million souls, Elder Khan continued. "We've evacuated what we could to the northern continents, but the machines adapt too quickly. Our energy shields are failing. Our people have no weapons, no armies. We are artists, traders, storytellers. We never learned to kill." The transmission showed Thylan children huddled in underground shelters, their large eyes wide with terror. Mothers held babies close as the mechanical grinding sounds grew louder overhead. These weren't warriors or conquerors. They were gentle beings who had spent centuries creating beautiful art and sharing it across the galaxy. 3 weeks, Elder Khan's image flickered as explosions shook his location. "Maybe less. The harvesters have surrounded our last cities. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us. Don't let our children die." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Vex looked around at the assembled representatives from dozens of worlds. Fear reflected in every face, regardless of species. "The Valkyrian fleet is fighting pirates in the Outer Rim," reported General Zix. 6 months away at best. "The Centaurian Navy has only defensive ships," added Commander Vex. "They lack the firepower." "What about the Andromedans?" someone called out. "Busy with their own border disputes," came the reply. Vex felt the weight of an entire species' survival pressing down on him. The Thylans had been trading partners for generations. Their music filled council halls during celebrations. Their children drew pictures that decorated diplomatic quarters across the galaxy. Now they faced extinction, and the galaxy's greatest powers could do nothing. The mechanical harvesters had appeared from dark space 5 years ago. They consumed organic matter for fuel and raw materials for reproduction. Entire civilizations had vanished before them. The Thylans would be just another meal unless someone acted fast. "Sir," Rilk said quietly, checking his datapad, "there is one possibility. The humans are only 2 hyperspace jumps away." Vex almost laughed. Humans, the violent newcomers who still fought wars on their own planet. What could they possibly do against machines that had defeated advanced civilizations? But as he looked at the tactical display showing Thylan Prime surrounded by death, Vex realized they were out of options. Sometimes, he thought, the galaxy needed monsters to fight monsters. Counselor Rix stood up from his seat, his forearms gesturing toward the holographic star map floating in the center of the chamber. A small yellow dot pulsed near Thylan space, labeled with symbols most council members couldn't even pronounce properly. "What about the humans?" Rix said, his voice cutting through the worried murmurs. "Look here, they're only 2 hyperspace jumps away from Thylan Prime." The chamber fell dead silent. You could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Every representative turned to stare at Rix like he'd suggested asking a pack of wild animals for help. Ambassador Vex shook his head slowly. "The humans. Rix, have you lost your mind? We've only known about them for 5 cycles. They're barely out of their Stone Age. They still fight wars with explosives and bullets," added General Zix, pulling up human military footage on his datapad. "Look at this. They strap bombs to flying machines and crash them into each other. It's madness. The hologram shifted to show Earth, a blue and green world that looked peaceful from space. But the data scrolling beside it told a different story. Hundreds of conflicts, weapons that could destroy cities, nations spending enormous resources on machines of war. Their planet has over 200 separate governments, reported Intelligence Chief Nex, reading from her files. They can't even agree among themselves. Half their population lives in poverty, while the other half builds weapons. They've had the capability to destroy their own world for decades, and somehow haven't done it yet. Counselor Tharn, an elderly being from the outer systems, tapped his walking stick on the floor. I remember when we first detected their radio signals, military communications, battle strategies, recruitment propaganda. We thought we'd found a warrior species. We did find a warrior species, Vex said grimly. That's the problem. They solve everything with violence. Disputes over resources. War. Disagreements about territory. War. Different belief systems. More war. Rix remained standing, undeterred by the criticism. But that's exactly why they might help. Everyone else here thinks with logic and calculation. We plan for minimal losses and acceptable outcomes. Humans don't seem to think that way. That's not thinking. That's insanity, muttered Commander Bex. Maybe, Rix replied, but the harvesters are machines. Pure logic. They calculate odds and choose the most efficient path. What happens when they face something that doesn't follow logical patterns? The chamber buzzed with nervous conversation. Some representatives pulled up more files on human behavior, showing battles where humans had fought against impossible odds. Stories of soldiers charging into certain deaths to save strangers. Records of humans traveling across their planet to help people they'd never met during natural disasters. Ambassador Vex stared at the tactical display showing Thylin Prime. The red dots representing harvester forces were growing larger every hour. Time was running out, and they were debating whether to ask for help from a species that most of them considered barely civilized. Fine, Vex said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. Send the message to Earth, but don't expect much. Maybe they'll spare a patrol ship or two. The emergency session alarm echoed through the United Nations building in New York. Representatives rushed into the main hall, still adjusting their ties and checking their phones. Most had been pulled from dinner meetings or late-night calls with their home countries. But when the message from space arrived, everything else stopped mattering. Admiral Jinwoo Kim walked to the center podium, his uniform crisp despite being woken up at 3 in the morning. Behind him, a massive holographic display flickered to life, showing the desperate transmission from Thylin Prime. The assembled world leaders watched in stunned silence as alien children ran through burning streets while mechanical monsters devoured everything in their path. Ladies and gentlemen, Jinwoo began, his voice steady and clear. 36 minutes ago, we received this message from the Galactic Council. An entire species is about to be wiped out. They're asking for help. The British representative leaned forward. Admiral, what exactly are they asking us to do? We've barely made contact with these aliens. They need military support, Jinwoo replied. The machines attacking them have destroyed several other civilizations. The Thylans have no weapons, no armies. They're artists and traders, not fighters. President Minji Park of South Korea stood up from her seat in the front row. Her translator whispered quickly in her ear as she listened to the alien transmission again. When the screaming Thailand children appeared on screen, her jaw tightened. How long do they have? She asked. 3 weeks, maybe less. The German chancellor raised his hand. Admiral, we're talking about deploying our forces in alien space. We don't know what we're facing. This could be a trap. Look at those faces, President Park said, pointing at the display showing Thailand families huddled in shelters. Does that look like a trap to you? The room erupted in discussions. Representatives argued about costs, risks, and political implications. Some worried about leaving Earth defenseless. Others questioned whether humans had any obligation to help aliens they'd just met. Admiral Jinwoo waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. The Korean space fleet stands ready to deploy immediately. But this threat is too big for one nation. What are we looking at in terms of numbers? Asked the American Secretary of Defense. Everything we have, Jinwoo replied without hesitation. Every ship, every crew, every weapon. The harvesters have never faced humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. President Park stood up again, her voice cutting through the chatter. Full mobilization. All human forces. We leave in 6 hours. The vote was unanimous. Within minutes, launch orders went out to every spaceport on Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies. Crews ran to their ships, while families said quick goodbyes. 300 vessels prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. The space around Thailand Prime had been eerily quiet for hours. The mechanical harvesters continued their slow, methodical destruction of the planet below, while Council observers watched helplessly from their monitoring stations. Ambassador Vex paced nervously on his command deck, checking the time every few minutes. Sir, his aide, Rilke reported. It's been 18 hours since we sent the message to Earth. Maybe the humans aren't coming. Vex was about to respond, when reality itself seemed to tear open. Space twisted and rippled like water, creating massive distortions that made his sensors scream warnings. Emergency lights flashed across the Council station as gravitational waves from hyperspace exits crashed over them. What in the void is that? Vex gasped, staring at his display screens. The first ship emerged from the swirling portal, like a metal mountain breaking through clouds. It was massive, angular, and covered in weapon batteries that looked powerful enough to crack moons. But before Vex could process what he was seeing, another ship appeared beside it, then another, then 10 more. Impossible, Rilke whispered, his tentacles shaking as he worked the sensor controls. The readings must be wrong, but they weren't wrong. Ship after ship poured out of hyperspace, filling the empty void with hulking metal beasts. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels that most civilized species built. Human ships looked like they'd been designed by engineers who expected to fight for their lives. Every surface bristled with guns, missiles, and armor plating thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. Captain Hai-Jin Lee's destroyer squadron emerged in perfect formation. 12 ships moving like a pack of hunting wolves. Her vessels alone carried more firepower than most species' entire defense forces. Behind her came the heavy cruisers, their hulls scarred from battles fought in Earth's asteroid belt. Admiral Rilke called out, his voice cracking. I'm reading 300 ships. 300. Admiral Jinwoo Kim's flagship, a massive battle cruiser called the Soul's Fury, took position at the center of the formation. His voice crackled across every communication frequency in the system. Reaching the Council station, the fleeing Thailand survivors, and even the mechanical harvesters on the planet below. This is Admiral Kim of the Human Expeditionary Force, he announced calmly, as if commanding the largest war fleet in galactic history was just another day at the office. We received your call for help. Sorry, we're late. Traffic was murder getting here. Vex stared at the tactical display showing hundreds of human warships arranged in perfect battle formation. Each ship was a floating weapons platform designed for one purpose, destroying everything that threatened humanity or their allies. The humans hadn't sent a token force or a few patrol ships. They'd sent their entire military to save strangers they'd never met. For over 1,000 years, the harvesters had conquered the galaxy using perfect mathematical precision. They calculated optimal attack vectors, measured acceptable loss ratios, and chose targets based on resource efficiency. Every battle followed predictable patterns. Organic species would deploy their forces, fight bravely for a while, then retreat. When losses became unsustainable, it was logical. It was civilized. It was exactly what their programming expected. The humans changed everything. Commander Minho, Choi's cruiser, the Busan Thunder, accelerated directly toward the largest harvester, mothership orbiting Thailand Prime. His tactical officer stared at the suicide course in disbelief. "Sir, we're on a collision trajectory. Should I adjust?" "Negative," Minho replied, his hand steady on the controls. "All crew to escape pods. We're going to show these machines what humans do for our friends." The harvester mothership's artificial intelligence calculated the approaching threat. Standard protocol suggested the human vessel would veer away at the last moment to preserve crew lives. But Minho kept accelerating, his engines redlining as he pushed every ounce of power into the charge. "For the Thailands," he shouted into his communicator as escape pods ejected from his ship. The Busan Thunder slammed into the harvester vessel at tremendous speed, its nuclear reactor detonating on impact. The explosion tore through both ships, vaporizing tons of harvester machinery in a blinding flash. The mechanical mind controlling the harvester fleet paused for 0.3 seconds, processing this impossible data. No logical species would sacrifice an entire warship for tactical advantage. The mathematics didn't support such wasteful behavior, but the humans were just getting started. Lieutenant Soyang Han led her fighter squadron through the harvester, defensive grid like a swarm of angry hornets. Her pilots flew straight into weapons fire that should have made them retreat. Instead, they accelerated into the danger, weaving between enemy ships while trading their lives for maximum damage. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Phoenix Leader," Soyang called out as anti-aircraft fire shredded her wingman's fighter. "Remember, we're not trying to survive this. We're trying to make it count." Her squadron dove into formations of harvester drones, accepting casualties that would horrify any civilized military. But each lost fighter took down 3 or 4 enemy ships with suicide runs, ramming attacks, or close-range explosions. The harvester collective mind struggled to process this tactical insanity. These humans fought like they wanted to die, but their apparent death wish was devastatingly effective. For the first time in a millennium, the harvesters faced an enemy that couldn't be calculated, predicted, or understood. The machines were learning fear. The explosion tore through the harvester command ship's hull, creating a gaping hole in the metallic monster. Before the mechanical repair systems could respond, Captain Tae Young-yoon and his Marines were already inside, their boots clanging against corridors filled with sparking wires and twisted metal. "Move, move, move," Taeyong shouted, leading his squad deeper into the ship. His shotgun boomed in the narrow passage, tearing chunks out of defensive drones that had never been designed to fight infantry. The harvesters had built their ships for space combat, not for humans running through their hallways with explosives strapped to their backs. Private Dongwoo Park kicked down a bulkhead door and tossed a grenade into the room beyond. Processing center secured, Captain. The Marines fought through corridors barely wide enough for their armored suits, using weapons that seemed ridiculously primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding them. But somehow, shotgun blasts and explosive charges were more effective against harvester machinery than any fancy energy weapon. The ship's artificial intelligence tried to calculate a response to this invasion. No species in its database had ever attempted boarding actions against harvester vessels. The corridors were filled with toxic gases, radiation, and electrical hazards that should have killed any organic life form within minutes. But the humans kept coming, their environmental suits protecting them as they planted charges on every critical system they could find. From his observation post, Ambassador Vex watched the battle unfold with growing amazement and horror. Human ships exploded, left and right, but their crews kept fighting until the very last second. Damaged vessels rammed into harvester formations. Fighters with failing engines dove straight into enemy command centers. They fight like demons, Vex whispered to his aide, watching another human destroyer sacrifice itself to destroy a harvester factory ship. No, worse than demons. Demons fight for themselves. These humans are dying for strangers. Commander Neon Lim's battleship group pushed deeper into the harvester formation, her massive vessels trading shots with enemies 3 times their size. Her flagship, the Ancient's Pride, had lost half its armor and was leaking atmosphere, but she kept advancing. All ships maintained course, Neon ordered, as another of her vessels exploded in brilliant fire. We don't retreat until everything is safe. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Harvester collective mind began running calculations it had never needed before. Retreat scenarios. These humans were destroying themselves to hurt the Harvesters, and somehow, it was working. The tide of battle was turning. The Harvester fleet's central processing unit ran the same calculation 17 times, hoping for a different result. Each simulation showed the same impossible outcome. Continued engagement with human forces would result in total annihilation of both fleets. No previous enemy had ever forced the Harvesters to consider mutual destruction as an acceptable battle strategy. But these humans seemed to embrace it. Major Jisoo Park's assault team had just blown their way into the last functioning Harvester command ship. Her Marines moved through the vessel like a wrecking crew, destroying everything they touched. The ship's defense systems fired toxic gases and electrical barriers, but the humans kept advancing in their sealed suits, planting explosives on every piece of critical equipment. Command center secured, Jisoo reported through her radio, watching sparks fly from destroyed control panels. This ship won't be harvesting anything ever again. The Harvester collective mind made its first retreat calculation in over 800 years. Human losses were catastrophic, but they showed no signs of stopping. Every destroyed human ship took multiple Harvesters with it. Every fallen human soldier disabled entire sections of Harvester vessels before dying. The mathematics were brutal but clear. Humans would keep fighting until everyone was dead. All units, withdraw from Thailand space. The command transmitted across the Harvester fleet. Harvesting operations suspended. Threat level unacceptable. The mechanical ships began pulling back from Thailand Prime, their logical programming finally accepting what their creators had never imagined possible. They were retreating from a species that treated interstellar warfare like a neighborhood fight, willing to burn down the entire galaxy to protect their friends. On the surface of Thailand Prime, Elder Khan stood outside the emergency shelters, watching pieces of burning metal streak across the sky like falling stars. Each glowing fragment represented a human ship that had died defending his world. Thailand children pointed at the beautiful lights, not understanding that each one was a grave marker for heroes they would never meet. How many? Elder Khan asked the human communication officer who had stayed behind to coordinate evacuations. 67 ships, the officer replied quietly. 12,000 crew members. Elder Khan's scaled hands trembled as more debris lit up the night sky. 12,000 humans had died to save 30 million Thailands. They had sacrificed themselves for a species they barely knew, asking nothing in return. The Harvesters limped away into dark space, their harvesting protocols permanently altered. They had learned something new about the galaxy. Some species would rather die fighting than live in submission, and humans, apparently, were very good at dying. The emergency session lights flashed red throughout the Galactic Council headquarters. Representatives from hundreds of worlds rushed to their seats, clutching data tablets filled with battle reports from Thailand Prime. The numbers on their screens seemed impossible to believe. Ambassador Vex stood at the central podium, his 3 hearts beating rapidly as he addressed the packed chamber. The human fleet has departed Thailand space, he announced. The Harvesters have been completely driven off. But the cost, ... He paused, looking down at his notes with disbelief. 67 human ships destroyed. 12,000 crew members killed in action. Gasps echoed through the chamber. General Zix from the Valkyrian Empire stood up, his voice shaking. Those are catastrophic losses. How are the humans responding? Are they demanding reparations? Territory? Trade agreements? Vex shook his head slowly. Admiral Jinwoo filed a standard after-action report, listed the casualties as acceptable losses during humanitarian mission. He requested replacement ships and crew assignments for their next patrol. The chamber fell silent. Council members looked at each other with growing concern. Most civilizations would need decades to recover from such devastating losses. The humans were treating it like a routine training exercise. Intelligence Chief next pulled up holographic displays showing human military communications. Their news broadcasts are calling it a successful rescue mission. Their leaders are already planning memorial services and preparing for the next emergency. They're not even angry about the losses. Counselor Rix, who had originally suggested contacting the humans, sat quietly in his chair. Around him, representatives whispered nervous conversations about what they had witnessed. "I've been reviewing the battle footage," reported Commander Dex from the Android. Humans' ships didn't retreat even when facing certain destruction. Their pilots rammed vessels into harvester formations, on purpose. Their soldiers boarded enemy ships, knowing they would die. "That's not tactics," muttered the Centaurian delegate. "That's madness." "No," Vex said quietly, his voice carrying across the chamber. "That's what humans consider normal behavior when protecting their friends." Across the galaxy, military strategists were pulling old files on Earth and its surrounding colonies. The species they had dismissed as primitive barbarians had just defeated an enemy that had conquered dozens of advanced civilizations. Human ships might look crude, but they carried crews willing to die for complete strangers. The question haunting every military planner was simple and terrifying. If humans would sacrifice this much to save aliens they barely knew, what would they do if someone actually threatened Earth? Nobody wanted to find out. Admiral Jinwoo Kim sat in his command chair aboard the Soul's Fury, watching Thylon Prime grow smaller in the rear display. The planet's surface still glowed with fires, but the mechanical harvesters were gone. 30 million Thylon civilians were safe, rebuilding their cities and mourning their dead alongside the humans who had saved them. He opened his communication channel to Earth Command, delivering his report in the same tone he might use to describe a training exercise. Mission accomplished. Thylon Prime secure. Harvester threat neutralized. No human territories threatened. Returning home for refit and crew rotation. But across the galaxy, nothing would ever be the same. In the council chambers, Ambassador Vex stared at intelligence reports flowing in from every corner of known space. Military commanders were rewriting their strategy manuals. Trade negotiations suddenly included new clauses about human protection agreements. Species that had never bothered to contact Earth were sending diplomatic gifts and friendship treaties. "Look at this," General Zix said, projecting holographic data across the chamber. "The Vrex Empire just offered humans exclusive mining rights to 3 star systems. The Corellian Republic wants to sign a mutual defense pact. Everyone's terrified of being on humanity's bad side." The footage from the battle played on repeat across galactic news networks. Human ships ramming into enemies twice their size. Marines fighting through toxic alien corridors with primitive weapons. Pilots diving their fighters into certain death to save people they'd never met. Counselor Rix pulled up tactical analyses from military academies across the galaxy. They're calling it the human doctrine now. Complete commitment regardless of cost. No calculation of acceptable losses. No retreat until victory is achieved. "It's not a doctrine," Vex said quietly, watching human ships jump back into hyperspace toward Earth. "It's just who they are." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had revealed something fundamental about their nature. They didn't fight wars to win territory or resources. They fought to protect things they cared about. And apparently, they cared about everyone. Intelligence reports showed human colonies throughout their space. Peaceful settlements full of families and children. Earth itself held billions of humans who would react to any threat the same way they had reacted to the Thailand crisis. The question that haunted every military planner, every government official, every species in the galaxy was simple and absolutely terrifying. What would happen if someone was foolish enough to actually threaten Earth? The answer, everyone now understood, would make the Harvester defeat look like a minor disagreement.